Hello, friends. This is the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby. The goal of the Alphalist podcast is to empower CTOs with the info and insight they need to make the best decisions for their company. We do this by hosting top thought leaders and picking their brains for insights into technical leadership and tech trends. If you believe in the power of accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. Plus, if you're an experienced CTO, you will love the discussion happening in our Slack space where over 600 CTOs are sharing insights, or visit one of our events. Just go to alphalist.com to apply. Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I'm your host, Toby, and today with me is the phenomenal Eric Bowman. And Eric Bowman is the CTO of King.com since March 2024, if I'm correctly informed. And King.com is the company behind Candy Crush and many other games. I hope that many of you play at least Candy Crush. He used to be the CTO of TomTom before, between 2019 and 2024. And beforehand, and that is where we met, and that slowly turned into a friendship, an online friendship, let's say, VP Engineering at Zalando 2019, where he was the one really pushing for agility back in the days, in a very radical way. It's an insider. So Eric, welcome on the podcast the third time, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, great. You're always like the best end of year guest, so maybe we just make it a standard thing we do every year, a tradition. It turned into a tradition, and since radical agility and today many things changed, and I just thought, hey, Eric shoots out many great agentic AI and agentic engineering ideas on LinkedIn, and I just wanted to chat with him about like how he introduces that to his teams and how he actually develops, how he tickles the taste of the engineers, etc. So let's do that. But Eric, quick reminder: like, why are you a nerd?
That's the only way to be. I couldn't not be that. It's just this is something people get passionate about, often at an early age, and it never really goes away. It's a way of looking at the world, trying to understand.
A way of thinking.
Yeah.
So, but you worked at Maxis and in gaming, etc. So you have quite a long history with computers, right?
Yeah. Going back to about 1982, probably is the first time I programmed a computer.
Good. And what was the last time when you programmed a computer?
2 days ago, maybe.
2 days ago. Okay, well, that's quite fresh. That's okay. That's accepted.
Yes.
And then a follow-up question. I mean, you kind of keep yourself up to date. And I recently saw a picture of you on LinkedIn when you had like I think it's self-printed, dangerously skip permissions on your shirt, which is,
yes,
I would say, quite a good insider. What do people ask you when they see that?
So basically, people either know what it is or they don't, and most people don't know what it is. And so if you don't know what it is, -- dangerously skip permissions is a command line option that you pass to Claude Code, which is one of the kind of leading agentic coding tools, and it basically tells it to do whatever it needs to do to your computer to get the job done. And of course, because AI is quite unreliable, you're definitely living a little bit dangerously by doing that. By default, it's quite careful about what it's allowed to do and what it's allowed to see and what it's allowed to change. But as you get into it, very many people get a little tired of constantly saying, yes, it's okay to do this, and yes, it's okay to do that. So dangerously skip permissions is just like, don't ask, just do. And it is, it's living dangerously for sure.
And so you're living on the edge.
Living on the edge, trusting the technology.
And what was the worst thing it ever did for you?
It really hasn't done anything bad on my computer. It's never done anything that I was like, oh, whoa, hold on, don't, that's destroying information, say deleting files or harming. But I've certainly embarrassed myself by trusting it. So the worst thing it's done by far is convince me that it was worth staking any kind of credibility on what was happening.
I think once I saw also like a popular LinkedIn post when someone asked like all the agentic systems to delete his hard drive or shut down all processes and then like destroy the computer or something. That was fun.
On a good day, it will do exactly what you ask it to do. Sometimes unapologetically.
So, you recently wrote a post about the 10K tab on LinkedIn, where you said like programming today with agentic is kind of comparable to a person who entered a factory 10 years ago, just tapping one machine once and charging 10K for it. Do you still believe that? Like, is it changing too quickly so that like in 2 years maybe you don't need to know where to tap, you just need to use natural language?
I mean, yeah, that's a very good question, and I don't know the answer. But I actually spend a lot of time thinking about like what is going on here when we use these tools, because of course, and rightly so, and myself included, there's plenty of anxiety about what is the role that human operators are going to have with this technology, and to what extent can essentially human decision making be replaced. And I think probably it's going to be a while before really important decisions are just completely handed over. But the way I think about it is, when you're using an LLM, you're interacting with this kind of inconceivably complex, multidimensional kind of like fractal thing. And it has, kind of peaks and valleys and local maxima and local minima. And as you try to do work and interact with it, you're kind of traversing some path through. I mean, it really is. It's not like the universe complex, but it is much, much, much more complex than humans can really understand. And it's very kind of sensitive to initial conditions, which is a kind of a term from chaos theory, where like the butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can affect the weather in Europe, kind of thing. And so where human expertise really comes into play is by sort of setting those initial conditions to start an interaction. And it is so sensitive that expertise really does play a very big role in kind of both setting it off in a good direction and then also course correcting as you go. And one way to think about it is kind of like a Dunning-Kruger machine. It's it like what it outputs is very convincing to people who are non-experts, and it's essentially been trained to be convincing, and instantly identifiable as wrong to people who are experts. And as you go through a sequence of steps, if you are unable to correct it, it will very easily go off in any number of possible directions. And those are all sort of interesting. And in fact, that very feature of being able to explore lots of different possibilities is one of the, I think, very interesting and valuable things about it. But certainly, for now, and probably for quite some time, simply because the energy use required to circumvent that would be really quite high to kind of build a system that can be constantly checking every single thing for kind of sanity and correctness. So I very much see, the power of LLMs and agentic coding is magnifying what's already there much more than being able to really create something unguided, at least reliably. There are definitely exceptions, but it's, I what I see kind of in my own use and in the use of the tooling around me is that it is kind of, dangerous in the hands of non-experts. When I use it to go explore things of which I am not an expert, I very often embarrass myself, because it's very convincing. And so, I still believe that metaphor, no metaphor is perfect, but the metaphor of, knowing where to tap is worth a lot. And I'll say, I see that kind of every day. Where I work, we are fully AI'd up. Many people are using some kind of LLM, and it, forms kind of the bedrock of a lot of communication. But you can still tell the level of expertise of the person using it versus not, and it is kind of only detectable to experts.
You're right. But one thing where it might be changing, I think, is like where you really have commodity. Like I think the last 10 years, let's say, of computing, or the last 10 years of programming were kind of like packed by repetition, right? Someone building a GraphQL, a React app that just puts data into a GraphQL store, right? Or GraphQL API. And does that for half a year, just building like a finite state machine or something, right? Like building a wizard and reinventing that. And that's now, from my perspective, got like worthless overnight, right? Like, I think that is kind of like an uncomfortable situation for the programming scene, I would say, but it's now reality, isn't it?
What you describe is like a simple application of a technology that you do not know, and it is incredibly valuable as a person who doesn't know the technology to be able to very quickly get to something that basically works, basically follows, the best practices, because those are what is documented, and that's what it is trained on. But it's another thing to ask it to debug it when it's not working. For most people, that quickly goes wrong, or requires, as much effort as, or perhaps more effort than an expert would require to fix it, but probably still less effort than that person who's not an expert would need to expend to fix the problem, simply because they just lack so much knowledge and experience with a very specific tool. Does that? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure I got your question right, though. Does that make sense?
Well, it more or less answers my question. Like I think like many things got commoditized for software engineers, so you don't need to know like how to build like finite state machine in React anymore, because like that, like at least you don't need to bootstrap that, or you need to rebuild it, right? That the LLM does that for you. And, yes, and it's still, you need to be an expert to understand the end result, and to especially like to iterate on this the status quo that you produce, right? Where like if you are not an expert, you kind of end up in an endless loop of like, hey, can you add print debugging in line 10? Not exactly like that, but you end up in an endless loop as a non-engineer, while you like are productive as an engineer, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, but looking back a year there, I think like many things that are now possible were not even possible in imagination. How do you think, like, if I would reverse my time machine question now and send you to the year 2030, how do you think this might look like? I mean, that's basically the same time between like your Zalando time and radical agility and now, which is like crazy, right? Like it doesn't seem to be like a huge jump apart from the AI topic. And how do you think this will progress?
Yeah, well,
hard to answer,
Yeah. Predicting is hard, especially about the future, as Niels Bohr said. I think there's a couple different kind of strands that I see, and I'm not quite sure which way it's exactly going to go. Like most people are sort of already working in a specific way in a specific environment. We're essentially working with a set of processes that already exist, and LLMs have entered that environment promising lots of things, but unless say the company like really tore everything down and started over, people start using these tools to essentially try to optimize around or in a small group the things that they're already doing. And that is actually quite valuable in some respects. One of the things I find interesting about agentic coding is that it does remove one of the sort of dimensions of variance in terms of software development. And, business people, for good reason, want predictability. They would prefer that, employees are more or less fungible or interchangeable, human resource units. And they want that not because, they're like bad people, but because it's the kind of simplification which makes it easier to run an organization at scale. If every single thing is special and different, it's just much, much harder. If we can simplify it down to we can move people around without consequence, that's a great simplification, and it's appropriate.
Every CFO dreams of DORA metrics really working out, right?
Yes. Well, yes. Well, then at least the ones that know what DORA metrics are. But, ultimately, there's only so far that we can get by optimizing what we're already doing. Let me finish the variance point. So, when building software, it's nice if it's predictable. Some things are predictable. Some things are not predictable. And ultimately, the most value creation tends to happen around somewhat unpredictable kind of R&D activities. We don't know like how long it's going to take to solve certain hard problems. And so, a CFO or CTO very often is trying to balance between what is predictable, what is not predictable. And that the unpredictable part is the kind of high variance part. And there are a lot of things that can lead to variance. And many of them are quite inconvenient. And one of them is just the simple, like, oh, we need this thing and we have to go learn about it, and maybe, in the past Stack Overflow had the answer. Maybe it didn't. Oh, wow. Okay. We have to integrate with this weird thing. And so LLMs just remove that challenge, which is, I don't know, like 40% of the high variance work. And that alone is super interesting. And I think undervalued. I'm observing kind of the bell curve as software developers at scale approach this tooling. We were neither bleeding edge nor are we lagging, but we're trying to move, a large group into this. And there's a bell curve of enthusiasm and skepticism about, is this a good idea? And I'm kind of watching, developers one by one make it through the change curve and like actually, get excited. And, we had a question today. We had a Cloud Code kind of outage where the integration with our SSO system didn't work. And, I was quite happy to see that people were quite angry about that. It's like, it's progress, they're like, we've made a leap where people are like, no, we need this thing. And removing that variance is important, but it's not anywhere near being able to remove all the variance, and probably never will be, because, the hard things will always be hard. And the hard things that have not been solved by someone else already are not really available in the training data. And so, whether human creativity or LLM creativity, which we can get to in a second, is required, and it's just kind of unpredictable. And it's like thermodynamics is like, we can wish it away, but that part's not going to change. And of course, I think we're going to go quite a long ways in terms of reducing or removing variance, and the tooling will get better. How we use it will get smarter. As you make the leap from using an individual LLM kind of chat session versus starting to orchestrate agents, there's certainly there is emergent behavior, which for me, it was astounding the first time I saw it. And I think many people will be going through that transition of like, oh, actually, this is something different. ChatGPT on its own or whatever is amazing. But what a fleet of them can do interacting together and with different personas and different perspectives, that definitely unlocks something new, which most people have not experienced yet. So that's going to change things. But ultimately, we can only go so far trying to improve how we are already working. And so what I am not personally, but I believe people in the world are figuring out quite different ways of working that are much more native using this technology. And there, I believe that the real value is going to be less around kind of like, let's optimize existing processes because they don't really exist, and more about using AI to coordinate in a way which is currently so difficult that people don't even really try to do it. But there is an opportunity to kind of negotiate between, let's say, autonomous teams or autonomous companies or, different parts of the world using AI, which previously required expensive alignment exercises, investments to normalize and connect technology. And suddenly AI is going to be able to do that. And what that is going to mean for us, I think, is very much unclear. But I think that is going to unlock huge value that's difficult for us to really conceive of.
Just circling back a little, what do you think is the difference? And then we go to more practical things. What do you think is the difference between AI creativity and human creativity? I mean, isn't human creativity backed a lot by inspiration? And isn't it kind of similar for, I don't know if take Nano Banana as an example, isn't kind of similar there? Isn't that kind of also in a way, doesn't it seem to self-develop, even though the models are trained every once in a while and not self-training or not really learning?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Very controversial topic. I on the one hand, I'm not qualified to really have an opinion about what is intelligence, what is creativity. Are we on the track to creating true intelligence, whatever that is, AGI? I don't know. This is just technology.
Yeah. For me. I don't know if I'm mad, but it's cool tools, right?
Cool tools, and we don't know what consciousness is. We don't know what intelligence is. We don't know what creativity is. We kind of know it when we see it, but in philosophical terms, this is still, in my opinion, terra incognito, and but it's a thing that our universe can do, and it's we may or may not. I mean, we're definitely figuring out something about what the universe can do through computation, and where's it going to go? I don't think we know. Insofar as what is creativity? Again, I don't know. I know it when I feel it. I also know I'm not that creative, really. Some people are much, much more creative, and I cannot speak to what that experience is. But I certainly have moments of creativity, and I tend to remember them. Some of them were meaningful moments in my career. Some of them I've had the good fortune that they, affected the work lives of thousands of people. And, but when I look at my own, I'm not that creative, persona. The more experience I've had, the more I read, the more I talk to people, the more I grow and learn, I believe the more creative I become. And I think that's because, really, not being a hugely creative person, what I'm kind of good at is like combining the ideas of others in different ways. And guess what? LLMs are good at that too. And I have personally seen LLMs and agentic systems do things which seem to me to be creative. Like, I can't really share the nitty gritty details of this one, but I can paint a picture. I had a question about how a particular business worked, and it was an unresolved question in a sense. Well, everybody believed that a certain thing was true, but exactly how it was true was being debated. And I certainly believed it was true. And I created an agentic system using MCP to access like a lot of data about this company and about this business problem. And I basically said, create as many agents as you need. I want these kind of personas. I want like a Jim Collins persona. I want kind of a Jeff Bezos persona, and I want a CFO persona. And I want you to go in and I want to figure out, is this thing which exists, is it this way, or is it this way, or is it this way? Which is it? Because we need to decide and agree. And it worked away about 45 minutes, I'd say, and spent probably 20 or 30 bucks in tokens. And it came back and said, it's none of those things. It's simply not true. And there was like nothing in the data saying that it wasn't true. Like nothing. No, there was no direct statement. Everything was like, I think it works this way, or I think it works that way. And that for me was like genuine creativity. And it was like a jaw-dropping moment for me. It was like, okay, I think it's right. I wish I could go into more detail, but what it was doing was taking ideas that existed and fitting them together, and like fitting it to patterns that it had seen. And when it couldn't do that, it came back and said, I can't do that because I think, I don't know. It's, I think I think we all live on kind of very thin philosophical ice about the role of creativity in our own consciousness. I think so much of it really is combining things we have experienced already. I think true, genuine, like 0 to 1 in your brain for most people is incredibly rare. And for those, like, we've all met someone who was like genuinely creative, and they're hard to understand, and there definitely could be something very, very different there. I don't know, but I don't know. I try to just be sort of humble that maybe humans aren't as amazing as we think we are. And
potentially not. We're just like good. I mean, that's also how, I don't know, wars work, for example, right? Or like building cities work, right? Like we kind of are good in like loosely connecting to each others and organizing as a swarm, right? Which, I don't know, agents are too, right?
Yeah. There's emergence phenomena in both cases, which are totally unpredictable, even though they're made of somewhat predictable elements.
It always depends on which drugs we take, right? So, coming to like a bit more practical fields, like, let's say you would have the chance now to start from scratch. Like, how would your ideal, let's not take your current company, how would your ideal Zalando look like these days? Like, if there's only you, how would you build that organization as of today? Would you do it exactly the same? Would you do it entirely different? And I like, let's focus on the tech field, right? Let's focus on that. How would you, if you had a green field, how would you do it today? Or let's say let's not talk of Zalando. Let's talk about like an indie SaaS, like you're building your own SaaS.
Yeah.
Like, first question, does it make sense to build a SaaS still? I think yes.
I think yes. Yeah. I think we're on the same page there. But probably what SaaS looks like in the future might be different, but that's a different conversation.
Sure.
I think, and it's an easier it's easier to talk about a pure digital company than a company like Zalando, which has liable inventory. But I think for me, what's helpful in trying to think that through is to not think of AI as something special. It's just technology. And so it is kind of the latest technology. And on the one hand, we want to be on the right side of sanity in terms of how much we embrace and depend on it, and be careful, not to vibe code our way to, a major data loss incident or something like that. But when you think of it just as technology, really, then all the same learnings and rules still apply. But the technology perhaps gives us the opportunity or possibility to leverage the most high leverage things about any business much more effectively. And so for me, and I think we talked about this last time, if we didn't, I'm even deeper down the rabbit hole. It's like time to value is everything. It's everything. And humans are bad at that. Basically, we don't understand where the time goes. And we all, or most of us, go and sleep a luxurious 6 to 8 hours a day, which in a value creating world is like, who has time for that? So necessarily, and also for our own health and well-being, there have to be large gaps in our personal productivity in order to remain productive. But if you are trying to compete in kind of a cruel world, and perhaps, for example, places that AI could do things that formerly humans could do, then they don't have those same kind of constraints potentially. And that's the kind of thing that, was perhaps interesting. And it's not only time to value, it's time to learning, right? And so everything about DORA, everything about, the goal and like flow of value and everything that Toyota did is like, that's all that stuff that's just physics. It's never going to change. We may get more refined in how we understand it and shape it. We may have more tools to optimize it, but the core ideas of DORA are, fundamental. And it's nothing about software. DORA is a more general idea applied to a software domain. And at the end of the day, it's kind of queuing theory. And so if I were starting from scratch now, I think I would be incredibly focused on, first of all, like, how do we build a rapid iteration learning machine, an evolvable learning machine? Because of course, your first idea is never really probably going to get market fit anyhow. And so, you want to be able to quickly iterate. And so if you look at, what makes that hard without the use of this technology? And can this technology help us in those ways? And so using AI, for example, to create, if you, do you know about the Andon-cord concept? Okay. So in Toyota factories, legendarily, they have this thing called the Andon-cord. And so, a car factory is more or less a relatively simple value stream compared to a value stream network that a typical software development operation is doing. But there really are things moving in steps. And, one of the things that they observed is that if something goes from one step to the next and there's a problem found there, that is incredibly expensive at scale and over time. And so if something gets handed to you that's not right, you pull the Andon-cord and it stops the whole production line, and you go back and figure out what happened here, which caused sort of a failure.
Yeah.
They measure in value stream. They call that percentage complete and accurate, and the goal is to get to 100%. And that has an analog in DORA, by the way, which is like can't remember the exact language, but how frequently deployments fail. It's exactly the same thing. Because if you're trying to do something repetitively, it's worth investing to make sure that the system never has to stop. And it's worth stopping it if that means it will never have to stop again for that reason. And so, I would be looking, for example, at how could I use agentic AI to make sure that every step of even that initial value stream was kind of relentless about making sure that every time something happened that was undesirable, the system would improve to prevent that from happening again. And I mean, also, and that basic idea, I think I would generalize, and I would focus very much on time to value, time to learning, and building a learning system as like the very core of what any product development effort can be, especially if it's software in the modern world. And you can do that with people, of course. And I mean, companies like Amazon in the COE, cause of error, and kind of 5 whys, and like really, like when something goes wrong, at least historically, like they really did stop and fix, and it was a big deal. And, like extreme operational excellence. Anybody can do that, but there are a lot of social challenges around doing that. And unless you are like a pure tech company where everybody kind of gets it, you also like there's constant business pressure. It's like, do we really have to, can't we just ship it and we'll fix it later? I would be relentless about never succumbing to that, because that is the domain of cognitive bias, in my view. It's not focusing on the short term at the expense of the long term. I want the short term and the long term, and using the latest technology to enable that strikes me as a killer feature.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it really is. It's just the question, like if you're really on a greenfield, like where do you start, right? What is it like? What is it exactly? How does that machine look like exactly, right?
Yes.
And well, yeah. Like how is time to value really defined? And
you can call it time to learning if that's easier.
Yeah, that's maybe easier. But time to value, like you also recently posted something on LinkedIn, I think, where you said like this is the only or the biggest North Star metric should be the biggest North Star metric for each CTO.
Yes.
Isn't this like the next level of role merging, basically? Because that, like from my perspective, is more like a typical product feature, right? Where the CPO was always like focusing on time to value. How do you think the roles will evolve looking at AI now and looking at what we're doing here?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, so much of the best thinking around time to value comes from this book, The Principles of Product Development Flow, which is a book for product managers, not enough of whom have read it. And I mean, honestly, CTO is almost certainly unlikely to remain long-term as a real title, because, technology is the oxygen, and it's like, what are we doing with it? We're the fuel, and what are we doing with it? And there's so much, it has been a hard road to figure out how to build software reliably, predictably, and, being able to iterate. And there are many, many things to learn along the way. And of course, we're not done, but a lot of the basics have been figured out. And now it's really becomes about product. And again, many of the basics have been figured out, although many people don't necessarily have the experience putting them into practice. And the essence of product development and the essence of modern CTO work is really minimizing time to learning, iterating quickly. How quickly can we get our ideas to confront the reality of the market in whatever form it takes, and learn from that and adapt, adjust, and leverage those learnings. And that is product, and that is CTO. And that's why I think the CPTO role is very much where I think the trend will continue.
I think it always depends on the scope, right? And the size of the organization and the size of the problem, actually. It could also lead to like the CXO role in long term. I mean, depending on like the expertise needed in like this or that field, right?
No, I agree. And I think, and you can easily imagine, like how a CTO-like person working with many CPO-like persons pursuing different product ideas on some shared infrastructure, for example. I mean, there are a lot of ways that it can be organized, and even what is the future of companies? It's unclear, but still at this moment there is very much like people who kind of get tech and people who get business, and the overlap, especially in Europe, is it's not what it could be.
Yeah, you're right. What is your idea on how to motivate engineers that are kind of still against it these days, against AI and against like picking up? Like, how do you in your organization make sure that everyone picks it up? And do you think it's a problem if someone doesn't pick it up? Is it like, are you missing out if you don't, or like how do you judge that as of today?
Yeah, I think I've gone through a couple kind of different progressions of how I look at this. And on the one hand, if we think of it as AI, people might have very reasonable kind of value-based objections to participating in what, in the most doomsday scenarios, this could take us over and destroy us. I was like, we might be playing with fire here. For those of us who, are forced to or choose to participate in the kind of capitalist system, we're all in. It's beyond our control. It's a pretty dramatic decision to step out of that for most people. If you think about it as technology, it's a little bit different. Imagine, I don't know, 50 years ago, it's like, you're refusing to use a compiler because like and those people existed for quite some time, and I met people who still refuse to use a compiler in the early 1990s, even that late. Fewer and fewer, and they did find interesting work, and it became increasingly specialized. And there are people who really, what they are passionate about is the craft of building software. And I mean, look, it's that's like a personal decision. And I can't really object. I think, however, on the one hand, I would say, why not give it a try? It might surprise you. We all, it's like you don't know what it is, how it works, what it means until you have used it. And even then, like, it's a journey. And personally, I struggle when I encounter, a closed mind. It just doesn't work for me. The universe is here for us to discover it, and why, like, anything once or twice, but so what we've done, we've actually we set a company level OKR that's 70% or 75% of developers would make at least 5 AI assisted commits by the end of the fiscal year. And it's I mean, it's a super straightforward OKR or key result, and it's problematic in some ways. But I think, if we're saying 99% of developers will make like 500 commits, that would be very different. I'm just saying, I really want most people to try it. Just try it. And we're not saying that if it doesn't work for you, I don't know, maybe ultimately this is not really going to be the way our current developers can be the most productive. And, I don't know, but it might be. And so let's try it.
Let's figure out, right?
Yeah.
Let's figure out. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a fair OKR or yearly goal. Do you already have one for next year in mind, or?
No, we'll save that for our fiscal year ends at the end of June. So I have a little bit of time.
Damn it.
We'll see.
So you still have some time. Like the people missing out still have some time. Okay.
But in general, I when I was at Guild Group, my boss, a guy named Mike Brizik, who, by the way, he started a company, and I think they spent the first 3 or 6, I don't know how long, a long time just getting the build system amazing. And Mike is someone who I think we're like pretty similar in mindset of like, let's figure out how to get value to flow, and then we will figure out what that value should be. And it's a rare thing. But he named this concept that I found very useful, called voluntary adoption, which is that, like, okay, sure, you're working in some company, there's a set of tools you have to use. It's not like you could just go, as if you're working at Amazon, there's just one cart and you have to use it. You can't go build your own cart. But even so, like, the mindset should be that, like, we want to create tools that people would voluntarily adopt, because not only do they have to, but it's actually kind of great. And you can't always do that, but I always try to start with that's the way this kind of stuff should roll out. Like, if it's really worth it, we should give people a chance to use it, try to help them understand what we're hoping to accomplish with it. Which, by the way, I mean, I think we're going to need more software developers, not fewer. It's going to be disruptive for sure. Like, exactly what people are doing is going to change. Our ability to create value is going to go up. And so let's figure that out. Let's admit that there are a lot of things that we don't know. But our goal is not to, like, get rid of all the people in the company. That's not the goal.
No, maybe create more software ultimately, or create higher quality software,
and raise the ambition level of what is possible. Yeah, with a fixed number of people, but also, I kind of alluded to it earlier. The sort of still very murky in my own head, but still really enticing possibility is the ability to start to coordinate the activity of a large group of people much more effectively than we can today. And, especially, at Zalando, with radical agility, we embraced autonomous teams all the way, and we missed a few things. Like, autonomy requires cooperation, but there's still, in many cases, a lot of kind of friction around how to coordinate increasingly bigger groups to achieve increasingly ambitious objectives, where everyone is actually really creating something of value, not simply like populating the supporting scaffolding and infrastructure for some tiny thing that we want to scale. There's something there. I can't really explain it yet. Maybe next year this will be more. Again, it's not just about what are we doing today, how do we do that better, how do we do things in a very different way by being able to use AI to do things that are too hard for people to do. Right now, what we're talking about, like, I'm not aware that AI can code things that the best programmers in the world can't already code. That may come. But there are things that are possible that people don't do simply because they're too too like intellectually challenging, but it's just too arduous. There's an interesting kind of anecdote. I think it's from a book called Reshuffle, where this guy is talking about the miracle of shipping containers was not the automation of the ports. It was that you could take a shipping container somewhere in China, like fill it full of all kinds of stuff and put one contract on it. And that shipping container could get on a truck and a train and a ship and another ship and a train and a truck and end up somewhere else in the world with that one contract the entire way. And that was the value unlock. And that was incredibly hard work by Singapore, incidentally, to set up this global network where all of these agreements were made to allow this. That kind of thing in the future, AI can do. Or like you look at a company like Get Your Guide, where you have people all over the world who are, it's like little operations that are low tech. People are writing things on paper. The integration work to get all of those people to adopt their business to the Get Your Guide thing. And I have no idea how Get Your Guide works, by the way. So I'm but that's like, when I think about things, this is the kind of thing where AI can form that interface that would otherwise require like a huge labor force to go out and do pretty mindless work. And so like a lot of us are still in a mindset of like, we don't see those opportunities because it's just inconceivable that we would employ that army. You know, you're sure if you were Google, yes, but those kind of insights, that's going to create markets that don't exist now. And I think that's really, really interesting. And I mean, I think there's a lot to figure out, but that to me, that's where things are really going to change based on this technology. Less about like, how do we make software teams, you know, more effective.
Yeah. So essentially, you believe in Jevons paradox, right? Like usage will really pick up, and with usage, there will be more programmers needed in that case, and more expertise needed. So
should we explain Jevons paradox in case?
Yeah, well, if you can explain it well, then go ahead.
So it's this idea that certain kind of new things like electricity or, you know, access to coal or access to AI, that they start out pretty expensive and people are like, oh, wow, this is going to be expensive. And then people say, oh, it's okay, because as more and more people use it, the cost will go down because demand and supply will work out. But they're so useful that demand actually goes up higher than the cost ultimately goes down. And so ultimately there's higher overall usage and higher overall cost. So, you know, it's like we're spending a lot on AI, but in, you know, 5 years, it's going to be way less. It's probably not. It's probably going to be as much or more, but we will be getting much, much more for that. But the demand will go up. And so, yeah, it's called Jevons paradox. And it's an interesting idea. It's certainly relevant. And, you know, you can imagine that there will be much, much research into driving down the cost of what is possible today. But you can also see that the demand for this is just it's never ending. It's
exploding, right? Like when every T-shirt has an IP address and
yes,
and like I don't know, looks at the world somehow and takes decisions. So let's see how that is gonna turn out, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, in a way, with computers, with IoT, with like all of what we see around us, it was always kind of true, right? Like it always developed that way. So let's see if it's also true with AI. I think it is, but that's maybe a thing to discuss in 1 year from now, right, Eric?
Yes. Let's make a date.
Let's do that. So thanks a lot for being my guest. And I think like maybe I mean, I always ask the time machine question, but maybe let's imagine, like, just quickly, you now had the chance to, through like some cheat and Candy Crush, you had the chance to travel back with your time machine to the year when you introduced radical agility. What would you whisper into young Eric's ears with the knowledge you have today?
Buy NVIDIA.
Okay, or
No, I think,
Bitcoin, right?
I mean, there are many things I would whisper to my younger self in general. I think, trying to imagine where we are now, it was too soon. But, for me, the basics remain basic, clear goals, partnership between management and product engineering that's meaningful and like trust-based. And let's measure and not be afraid of measuring, and like arbitrary dates are absolutely fine. If there's no date, there's no late. And let's kind of obsess over time. Let's obsess about learning. Let's obsess over time to value. And like everybody be human, and we're all learning here, and let's have fun. It's a great thing we get to do. Even on the bad days, it's much, much better than what most humans have had to endure before us, and there's much to celebrate. There's plenty to worry about, but all we can really do is try to make our immediate circle a little bit better.
Let's do that. Thanks a lot, Eric.
Thank you,
Bowman.
Man. Good to see you.
Applause. Hope to see you in a year at like latest, let's say. Let's see what happens in the next year. Like, I'm a bit scared, but like crazily excited about it. So really looking forward. Thanks a lot for your time, and happy holidays.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Alphalist podcast. If you liked this episode, share it with friends. I'm sure they love it too. Make sure to subscribe so you can hear deep insights into technical leadership and technology trends as they become available. Also, please tell us if there is a topic you would like to hear more about, or a technical leader whose brain you would like us to pick. Alphalist is all about helping CTOs getting access to the insights they need to make the best decisions for their company. Please send us suggestions to cto@alphalist.com. Send me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter. After all, the more knowledge we bring to CTOs, the more growth we see in tech. Or, as we say on Alphalist, accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth. See you in the next episode.